South Africa's deep inequality and rising unemployment is going to be the focus during a webinar. It's being hosted by the African Centre for Security Intelligence Praxis. There's a lot to talk about, also what the role of the media is in national security. Well, for more on the webinar, I'm joined by the Centre's Executive Director, Mr. David Africa. Hello to you, David. Good to have you with us here on ENC. So a lot to unpack as far as what's in this webinar as well. But let's talk a little bit about rising unemployment, inequality. How does that come into a conversation regarding the Centre for Security Intelligence?
Hi, good morning, Gareth, to yourself and the viewers. Well, I think, Gareth, if we look at the July events, which is at the moment the topic of a review initiated by the president, and we look at the sort of perennial occurrence of service delivery protests, then quite clearly we have an economy that has not produced, the kind of life for South Africans, including employment, that is required. So what happens is that the economy has very direct national security consequences, because you can't have almost half of your population unemployed and expect that things will run smoothly. And July was a taste, I would say, of what could happen if we leave this economy in the shape that it is.
I suppose the problem is, David, I don't think many people will disagree with you. The issue is going to be this isn't a quick solution. There isn't a very quick turnaround. We're hearing that we might get the economy back to pre-COVID levels sometime in 2022. But even pre-COVID levels, David, I'm sure you'll agree, the unemployment rate and the economy wasn't looking too great either.
No, you are right, Gareth. I mean, since 1994, well, and obviously before then, the economy has not, it has not served the majority of South Africans. I mean, most poor people are, materially speaking, no better off than they were 20 years ago. So it's not the issue with COVID. I mean, it is the fundamental issue of the structure of the economy, and we are dealing with a paradox here where we have a democratic polity. I mean, we have a great constitution and free elections and so on. But we have an economy which impacts obviously on the daily lives of South Africans that remains firmly entrenched in apartheid, because it's essentially an apartheid economy. It's an untransformed economy. And so it can't be a quick fix. Right? It is. We're talking about a generational or a multi-generational transformative project. It's not something you do in 2, 5, 10 years. I mean, if you look, for example, at China and where it was 40 years ago and where it is now, I mean, we are talking about that level of transformation. And the fact that it's not that there's no quick fix doesn't mean that you shouldn't start. And the problem is that we are not grappling with starting that transformation, which is so necessary.
So now that we've seen what happened back in July, obviously the entire country very aware of just how quickly, David, that things can turn on its head as far as looting and violence is concerned. I'll leave this with you as my last question. What have we learned? What do you think we should have learned from what we saw back in July? Because what we certainly can't have is another situation like that, and then national security coming out and saying that they were caught off guard. There was a failure of national intelligence. That excuse simply won't hold water next time.
Well, I'd like to say two things, Gareth. The first is that, the obvious lesson we should have learned is that when your people, and here I mean poor black people, can be weaponized against their own government, then there is something fundamentally wrong in the lives of those people. And our contestation here is that it's the economy. That the economy is sabotaging the political transition that has happened. That's the first thing. The second thing is that, and I think, there's the concept of, and you've just mentioned it, an intelligence failure. But I think that we are talking about a broader national security failure. That we obviously as outsiders, we don't know, whether there was intelligence, whether it was of a sufficient quality and so on. But remember that you have intelligence, which is produced by a number of institutions. Then you have response capabilities. And then you have, at the highest strategic level, you have political capabilities. And it seems to me that the system in its entirety has failed, that it cannot be pointed to be an intelligence failure, but a broader national security failure, so that the entire system of producing information, managing that information, deploying it, and taking wise decisions on the basis of that intelligence, that entire system has failed.
David, I'm going to say thanks very much indeed. In fact, maybe before I let you go, just 10 seconds. When is this webinar? Can anybody tune in? Can they watch? Is it by invite only?
Gareth, well, I must disappoint you in that the webinar has happened, but it's part of a series that we are running. So we run every 2 months, we will be running a webinar on the theme of the political economy of South African national security. So, I mean, we'll share with you the information for the next one.
All right. And
after the holidays.
So there's no place someone can go and catch up on this webinar, for example?
No, unfortunately not. Unfortunately.
Not a problem. Well, it's been a great conversation nonetheless. I've really enjoyed speaking to you. David Africa, Director of the African Centre for Security and Intelligence Praxis, joining us here on the South African Morning.